Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's discussion. We have with us Dr. Doğan Koç, the Executive Director at the Gulen Institute in Houston, Texas. He'll be addressing the topic under the heading of Strategic Defamation of Fethullah Gülen, Turkish versus English. And it may be worthwhile, particularly for those that don't know, if you say a few words about who Mr. Gulen is, Dr. Koç, and maybe a little bit about the movement that have been inspired around his ideas. And for the record, the Rumi Forum has as its honorary president Mr. Fethullah Gülen. We're founded around his ideas of dialogue as well. So, Dr. Koç, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for coming and inviting me. This talk is actually a result of research that I conducted in 2010. And it became later a book. And I believe you know basically what Gulen movement is and what Gulen is, but there is, some information for those who doesn't know about the Gulen and the movement. Fethullah Gülen, mainly known as an advocate of dialogue and education. He's known as a moderate Muslim. Around his ideas, he inspired the movement in Turkey mainly, and the movement is very active in the world, in many countries, establishing schools and providing quality education for the country, and also very active in interfaith and intercultural dialogue. Gulen personally met with the religious leaders in Turkey and started interfaith dialogue in 1995 or 1990s. And there are a lot of interfaith and intercultural institutions inspired by the Gulen. Rumi Forum is one of them. But there are many in the world, in other places as well. The movement is also very active and becoming very active in aid distribution as well. There is an organization called Kimse Yok Mu in Turkey that collects donations and distributes it throughout the world, mainly in Africa, in Turkey, in Asia, and other places. His work has been supported and admired by many leaders, religious, political, local and international leaders. There has been coverages by the world media about the movement, about the schools or interfaith dialogue. But that is not the subject of my topic today. First of all, I'd like to tell you why I start doing the research. In 2009, in the winter of 2009, and probably most of you know, Rachel Sharon Crespin published an article at Middle East Quarterly, which is published by Middle East Forum. And then in that article, she actually draws a picture of Gulen, or in fact, draws a picture of Turkey, which is going towards Russia, Iran, becoming anti-American, anti-Semitic, anti-Western. And she blames Fethullah Gülen for being the major factor behind that. But it wasn't the reason that I started doing research. In her article, she, you can see that over there, she says that Fethullah Gülen is a financial heavyweight controlling Unplugged and PAC budget estimated at $25 billion. And if you look at the source 3, if you go back, that's actually an article that I co-authored with Helen Roziba. So which means, my article is the source of that information. But we didn't have anything stating that, Fethullah Gülen controls $25 million or such thing. We were actually looking at why people were donating and how was the system constructed. So, but we didn't have anything about, I mean, we had some figures like dollars, but it wasn't like 20. We were not trying to look at, the total budget of the movement. Then I, actually responded back to the journal, stating that this is, I don't know if that information is correct or not, but I know for sure that you cannot use my research as a source for that information. You have to correct that. So then I was naive, I didn't know much about it, and I got response. They were telling me that, maybe they can publish something that I can respond to her. But I was basically asking, just correct that information, because you cannot refer to my study to cite or to give that information, because it's not there. Anyway, so they didn't respond, so it didn't go through. Then I ended up writing an article which is actually in the book. But when I was looking at the internet, so this wasn't just a simple article actually. It was crafted in a way that can go in high rankings when you Google Fethullah Gülen. In fact, I became an SEO, what they call search engine optimization expert, when I was doing this research. If you look at, I Googled during those times, if you Google Fethullah Gülen, if there's what we call sponsored links at Google, which means, if someone, Googles a keyword, you pay Google and it comes either on the side or sometimes at the top, but you have to pay money. If you look at, I Googled Fethullah Gülen, and if you look at, it's got sponsored links, and Fethullah Gülen's danger, Middle East Forum, referring to that article. During those times, actually, 3 other organizations were paying Google to be listed at the sponsored links when someone Googled Gülen. One was Middle East Forum, Interfaith Dialogue Center in New Jersey, and Rumi Forum. And Fethullah Gülen is the honorary president of both Rumi Forum and the Interfaith Dialogue Center in New Jersey. So it makes sense for someone or some organization to pay Google or to spend money if someone Googles, its honorary president, to reach them. But it was quite difficult to understand why Middle East Forum was paying Google and spending money for an article that they published, just one single article. And I asked I worked with some experts on these issues, and they were actually guessing Middle East Forum spent almost $50,000 per month for those searches. So it's quite a money, So then I started, so that something is going on, and there must be something else. So then I actually ended up doing this research. So this is the story of the research that I started. The title is Strategic Defamation of Fethullah Gülen, English versus Turkish. Before I start looking at how he was defamed or is defamed, it's necessary to define what we mean by defamation. And I used Hankins' definition for defamation. Defamation is false. It impeaches the subject's character. It is published to third parties. If someone is defaming someone, it's not actually for that person. So you have an audience, and you defame that person for the audience. That's why actually it makes sense they are paying Google, because I don't Google Fethullah Gülen because I know, and they don't Google Fethullah Gülen. I think they know. So it's those people who doesn't know anything about Gülen, they Google. So, and I think most of us do that these days. So it is actually published. A defamation is published for third parties. It damages the reputation of the subject, and it is done intentionally. So these are the criteria that I used when I was gathering my data and looking at how Gülen was or is defamed. First, I divided, because there are many pictures of Gülen. Gülen is different, and we'll see those pictures here. And I define one, Gülen 1, mainly in Turkish, and Gülen 2 in English. And in Gülen 1, what is Gülen? There are several themes. You know, he's an American puppet. He's part of the Middle East project. His modern Islam is not true. He's Pope's secret cardinal. He works for the Vatican. He has Zionist connections. And he's actually not Muslim. He's destroying Islam. And these are the 4 themes that I looked in Gulen 1. I think you need to keep in mind when I say Gulen 1 and Gulen 2, so you need to know which one is which. This, you know, especially in Turkish articles or books, you know, this is one of the most common theme that is used to defame Gulen. There are many books published on this issue. The idea is, America is actually right now is designing a new Middle East. It has a Middle East what they call a big Middle East project. So it's designing Middle East again, referring to war in Iraq and other issues as well. But it has partners in the region, and Fethullah Gülen is the chair of this project in the region, and Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan is the vice chair. If you look at this, these 2 pictures on the right are book covers actually. Hikmet Çetinkaya wrote almost 10 books on the subject, and it's the same deal. Fethullah Gülen next to President Bush, and he's saying in Turkish, "Obadi, I'm taking care of that business." And then the other one is Ergun Porras, and the name of the book is Imam in America. And you can tell what he means by that. They even claim that the schools in Central Asia or other places are funded by America. CIA agents are working in those schools. Red Cross is actually providing supplies for those schools. And teachers, most of the teachers actually have American passports. The second theme, that's also interesting. These are pictures you can find online. And Gulen is, as you can see, is pictured as the Pope. And it says friend of God or friend of America. There is a book called or written by the Altindal, and he claims that the Pope or the popes always have 2 hidden cardinals. No one knows their identity. They are hidden. Only the Pope knows their identity, and these people are positioned in non-Catholic, non-Muslim societies to convert them to Christianity. I think it's called impacture. And he claims that Gulen is one of them. That Gulen is actually making it easy for Christian missionaries in Turkey and in the Muslim world to Christianize them. So he is actually the hidden cardinal of the Pope. Other theme, not American connection, but he has connection with Israel. This time Gulen becomes not a CIA agent, but he becomes a Mossad agent. He has connection with Zionist groups, and he works for them. The book, it's called Musa'nın Çocukları in Turkish, which means the children of Moses. And you can see it's David Starr and the Prime Minister and his wife in the center. It's not only one book, single book. There is a series of these books. And the same author claims that the leading figures in the AKP, the current government, and Gulen are actually crypto Jews. I mean, they are Jews hiding their identities. Very interesting. This book or these books were purchased by some military generals with the military money and distributed in the military circles. And the author was actually paid by the military. He was receiving salary. And they also claim that ADL is actually distributing Gulen's books for free throughout the world. So that's another theme in Gulen 1. The last theme, there are also other themes, but these are the major ones that I looked at. Gulen is not Muslim. I mean, there is a book called Is Gulen Muslim, or Is Fethullah Muslim, by Semih Tufan Gülaltay in Turkey. They claim that Gulen is not in fact Muslim. He doesn't actually know much about Islam. His knowledge on Islam is also limited. In this book, he claims, this is very interesting, quite interesting, you know, not a Jewish or a Christian, but he claims he's a Baha'i. You know, he claims that, you know, with this interfaith dialogue work that he's doing, actually he's trying to, you know, collect or gather all these faiths together. At the end, Gulen will establish a Baha'i empire in the world. I mean, he wrote a whole book on this issue. So there are some other themes as well. But when we look at Gulen 2, so you need to keep in mind what was Gulen 1. When we look at Gulen 2, so there is a totally different picture. He is Islam's Trojan horse. Modern Islam that he is using is Taqiyya. He is America's Khomeini. He is trying to overthrow the Turkish secular government, and he will establish an Islamic state in Turkey. He is actually trying to resurrect the Ottoman Empire, and he will establish a universal caliphate. He is infiltrating into the United States through charter schools. And he is training an Islamist militia in the United States. I mean, these are the, you know, pieces, I mean, themes that are written about Gulen. This is very interesting. I mean, Trojan horse is used by both Turkish and English, you know, authors. I think it is a common usage of the term if you mean someone is actually hiding its intention and, you know, getting into a society, then it will, you know, destroy or do something or conquer within. It is used. While the Turkish authors are saying the modern Islam is actually an American project. You know, America doesn't want a resistant Islamic or Muslim population, so it's using modern Islam. But in this case, they are saying Gulen is actually using modern Islam to Islamize, let's say, the Western society. There's a nice quote that I like a lot. I like to read that. This is written by Fitzgerald, and I quote, he says, "Now that Turkey is going just as Fethullah Gülen wished, you may ask why he doesn't fly home to a hero's welcome. And the answer is that now he has other and bigger fish to fry. He has the entire Western world to help conquer from within." The theme that I like most is, or find smart, let's say, or clever, is that Fethullah Gülen is America's Khomeini. You know, the idea is just like Khomeini, France actually hosted Khomeini. Then Khomeini went back to Iran and established an Islamic state. And they're saying you're doing the same mistake, I mean, to the American government. Look, this guy, you're hosting this guy here. And he'll go back to Turkey and establish an Islamic state, just like Khomeini did. Another one is, which is actually tied to these themes, and this, the original picture here is actually Kemal Atatürk, but they, you know, switched with Gülen. But what they are saying is, you know, Gülen is infiltrating into the police in Turkey, to the military, to the government, to the system, to the state, and he will establish an Islamic state in Turkey by using his power in the military, in the police, and the state departments. So that's another theme that is used a lot in these articles or books. Another one, Gulen is trying to establish a new Ottoman Empire, and he's trying to establish a universal caliphate. Since Gulen is in the United States, eventually Obama administration supports the establishment of universal caliphate. One person claims that, I think in 10 or 15 years, 60% of the United Nations will speak Turkish because of the activities of the Gulen movement. So the universal caliphate is coming, and then there will be a new Ottoman Empire, probably bigger than the old Ottoman Empire. And that's still Gulen too. When I was collecting data, and I said, I ended up collecting data at the end of 2010, this theme wasn't very common. There were some people who were writing on this issue, schools, charter schools, that the people inspired by Gulen, open or Gulen charter schools in the United States, they're actually infiltrating into the United States using these charter schools. After that, actually, for the last 2 years, this theme became the most common, probably the only theme that they write, and they focused on this theme. But when I was collecting data, it wasn't very common. This is also interesting. Paul Williams, he started writing about Gulen towards the end of 2010, but he wrote a lot. He wrote a lot about Gulen. In fact, this is, if you know, this is the front gate of the place where Gulen, the retreat where Gulen lives, and he in fact went to that place and took pictures. And I think the idea was to show how investigative journalist he is, or he was. And he claimed that, actually I have that quote as well, that's a very nice one too. He says, powerful Turkish Pasha Fethullah Gülen has established a 45-acre mountain fortress. The fortress remains protected by 100 Turkish guards and a sentry post. Local residents have complained of automatic gunfire coming from the complex and of a low-flying helicopter that surveys the area for would-be intruders. And a local newspaper, after he published this, and the local newspaper went to the region, and interviewed the neighbors, and of course nothing was true. They tried to reach him, but couldn't get a response. But that is actually, that is written not only by him, some other credible people as well. They claim that Gulen is actually training an Islamist militia in Pennsylvania. But he's not writing anymore. Paul Williams is not writing anymore. I don't know what happened, but he had a case with the McMaster University in Canada. He claimed the university has a nuclear lab. And there are some Egyptian-born professors, faculties at the university. And then he wrote a book and claimed that actually these professors are preparing a nuclear attack or nuclear attacks to U.S. cities. And the university filed, a case against him, asking $2 million for the damage of the reputation that he caused them. Probably because of that, he doesn't write anymore. His site was, the name was the Last Crusader.org. He was publishing his articles there. Next picture actually, because of him, he was also claiming that CIA is actually funding the Gulen movement through the drug money that is made in Afghanistan. So he claimed that that drug trafficking money is given to the Gulen movement by the CIA. So that is, these are the themes that we have. You have to keep in mind again. I'm reminding again, what is Gulen 1? Gulen 1 is he's an American or Zionist or Vatican agent. Gulen 2, he is Islamist, new Khomeini. He is trying to establish new Ottoman Empire and a universal caliphate. So you need to keep in mind in terms of data. I looked at, as I said again, the data covers from 1998, I think the oldest entry from 1998 to 2010, or probably at the end, so you can say 2011. I collected 436 cases, books, articles, web postings. So then I established a data set to look at. While the Turkish, just an information, while the Turkish cases were mainly printed, either book, newspaper articles, journal articles, the English versions were mainly online publications in blogs or websites. When I was actually, this is important. When I was collecting data, I didn't include any article that is criticizing Gülen. I only collected or included cases that were actually defaming him. Give you an idea. I think it was either Emin Koç or Aziz Karaca from New Message newspaper. I think it was Koç, who has the same last name with me. He said, I'm against the interfaith dialogue that the movement is doing. I'm against it. It's not good for us. It's not good for Turkey, and such and such. I did not include that because that person's thoughts, and he's free to be against the work of the movement. So I did not include that. But in another article, he is saying the same thing, but then saying this is actually a Vatican project. So Gülen is working for Vatican. Then I included that. So it is necessary to understand that I didn't include anything that is criticizing, just the defamation articles. If an article was published, several times, because especially in the English versions online, it is posted, and reposted again, I only included one. If an article is not, it wasn't very actually many. If it is mentioning two pictures, I coded accordingly. Especially Paul Williams. One side he's saying Gülen is trying to establish a universal caliphate, then the CIA is actually supporting him. So then I included that twice and coded accordingly. This is the statistic that I got. Again, it's actually there. If you look at the table, Gülen 1, which is, he is an American Zionist Vatican agent. In Turkish, 98%. 98% in Turkish, he is defamed as Gülen 1, as American Zionist or Vatican agent. But on the other hand, in the English versions, it's reverse. Almost 90% he is defamed as Islamist, Khomeini, trying to establish New Ottoman Empire and Universal Caliphate. The number of the articles in the data set actually in Turkish one are much more than the English versions, because when I was when I was collecting data, the English defamation art, it was just starting. It probably started after Rachel Sharon Crespin article, and actually we can see that in this timeline. This is Gülen 1. We are looking at Turkish, so this is not many, so it's not the focus. The focus is here. If you look at, before the 2000, so this is Turkish, yeah. 2004, there were a couple of articles, but in 2003, there is a huge jump. Almost 30, 35 articles every year. That is defaming Gülen. Then it's declining towards 2009, then it's increasing again. I didn't look at what was the reason, why it was changing. I didn't do a research on that, but I have a guess. And this is, I think, an educated guess. if you know what's happening in Turkey, what we call Ergenekon case, some high-ranking generals were arrested, in jail, and it's actually, and also because of coup attempts, and that is somehow matching with those attempts. So they were planning some coups in Turkey, and probably these numbers increased those times. As I said, I didn't do a research on that, but I think I'm right on this issue. Especially, I mentioned about Ergun Poyraz, who wrote a lot of books about Gülen. When the prosecutors were looking into a case about a retired general for corruption, mainly, 3 million something lira or dollars were missing during his commandership, and when they were looking at what happened to that money, they end up finding, Ergun Poyraz, the author, actually had a salary from his chapter of the army, and his books were purchased and distributed. So then, it somehow it is matching with those coup attempts. I think that is, that's why we see jump in those timelines. But the English one is also interesting. We don't have many articles in English that shows Gülen as Gülen 1, but many shows Gülen as Gülen 2, as Islamist, as an anti-American, anti-Semitic, as Khomeini or New Ottoman Empire. There were a couple of articles before 2009. This one article that you see over here, 2009, it's the Sharon Crespin article. It's like, to me, she just pushed the button and then just opened the box. And then, a lot of articles came out of that. And right now, I think it's more than this. And then I ran a correlation between the language and the picture of Gülen. So I coded Gülen 1 as Gülen 1 as 1, Gülen 2 as 2, Turkish as 1, and English as 2. I ran the test, and it is significant, statistically significant, and the correlation is positive. It's a huge, a high correlation, 0.87, which means there is a huge relationship between the picture and the language that is used. I think I can say, by having this result, if you tell me the language of the article that is defaming Gülen, I can tell you what is inside it without reading it, without looking at it, just from the language, and I will be right 87%. So the strategy is the language and the audience. They are using, I think, the fears or the sensitive issues of different societies. Now, usually, if you read, there are not many people who can read both languages. Most people read either Turkish or English, so they don't know what's happening in other languages. They don't know what's written in other languages. And if you look at American society, especially, an Islamist danger, Khomeini, Islamic State, Iran, that kind of issues are, sensitive issues. And American society, I think in general has a fear about that issue. So it makes sense. It is strategic to use that same language for Americans, and vice versa, in Turkey, another issue. It is actually designed according to the audience. As I said, it became a book. What else in the book? A short bio of Gülen and introduction of the movement. Some other details, but also, I looked at who are these people. Who are they? Again, when I was collecting data, the English version, there were not many, and I did not know the details of these people, but I could guess there was some Islamophobia, authors who were writing in general against Islam. So Gulen, actually being a Muslim, a moderate Muslim, so became a target, easily of those groups. But in Turkish, there were two different groups, very, very interesting groups. One is I think we can call radical or radical Islamist, and one is ultra-secular nationalist. Quite different. I mean, these people cannot come together. But on the issue of Gulen, they were writing the same things. But each had somehow different themes. When the nationalist or ultra-secular nationalists were saying mainly he's an American agent, he's working for America, the Islamists were saying he's actually working for Vatican. So, but they were, it's very interesting. These people, can come together on some issues. So there are details of these people, some names, some groups in the book. And also the data set I have. And my response to Sherry Crespin, because I thought and I still think that article is essential. It started defamation in America. It is crafted. You won't believe. If you know search engine optimization. It's a very nice piece. It is obvious that some experts crafted that in terms of Google searches. If someone searches Gulen, that article comes, and it's actually, since then, it is actually in top 10 at the front page. Then I responded back to her, not only that, and some other, data manipulations she did, some miscalculations she did about Turkey in general or about Gulen. So that is also included in my book. What is not in the book, or what is not I didn't study, I don't look at why. Why? And this is actually an important question. Why these people are doing this? And I didn't study that. There were, first of all, it's a different search, and I do quantitative studies mainly, and it's difficult to quantify why. You can quantify how, but not why. And the other thing is actually, since Fethullah Gülen is not known well in the West, in general, I didn't want to lose the readers. If I first of all, I think I can look at Turkey, and I can at least give some reasons why they are doing that. But I have to go back to the history of Turkey. I have to explain the history of Turkey. I have to explain the struggle between secularists and the Muslims. I have to go into the Ergenekon case and such. So then it becomes a whole another issue. So it's difficult to somehow explain without going these issues. So I didn't want to spend time on that, and also I didn't want to lose readers on that issue. I think that's it. What we have and what we don't have.
Okay. We'll take questions in a moment. I'll ask one or two as the moderator for this evening. I'm not too sure if you want to approach the question of why. You may, if you have, irrespective of the book and your research, an answer to why there is this level of defamation. Dr. Koç, why?
Yeah, again, as I said, I don't study that, but yeah, I can make guesses, and I think I mentioned those. Politics is there for sure. Especially in Turkey. Some groups, especially secular militarist groups in Turkey, were not happy or are not happy with the current government. and they think the Gulen movement is actually supporting the government, and I think that's true as well. I mean, for some time, and that I think that because it's not only I'm presenting data on Fethullah Gülen, on the movement, but there is also same, very similar articles on the AKP as well, on the Prime Minister as well. So politics is there. I mean, some people within, especially within the military circles, were not happy with the government, so they wanted to throw the government. So they were actually preparing coups. That's one. I think ideology is there too. Some people, since the beginning. I mean, like Hikmet Çetinkaya, he's been writing on Gulen for 30 years. But interestingly, and I think this is also, supports my research, he was claiming that Gulen was an Islamist, and he was trying to establish an Islamic State in early days. But after 2010 or 2000, he changed. I think it didn't make sense, or it didn't, I don't know what happened, but he changed. I mean, he was saying, Gulen was an Islamist, trying to establish an Islamic State, but right now he became an American puppet. But for him, I think it was ideology. And recently he actually visited one of the Gulen movement affiliated institution in Turkey and said, he won't write. He has written everything he had, so he won't write again. And he said, people has changed, I'm changing as well, that kind of thing. So that's, I think, ideology for some people is there as well. So it's like they're, in a way, anti-Islam or anti-Muslims. So Gulen is a Muslim scholar, in inspiring a lot of people, very effective in Turkey. So then eventually becomes a target for that. But in America, I think the politics is there too. Some people are, I think, misreading what's happening in Turkey. Again, they are not happy with the government. They don't like the policies, and they think the Gulen movement and the AKP is the same. Again, if you remember, or a couple of years ago, there was a campaign, in a way, a campaign in the West saying that Turkey is changing its axis. Turkey is becoming, it's turning its back to the West. It's becoming, pro-Russian, pro-Iran. And then Gulen movement, I think because they misread the issue, the country, they think that they are the same. The movement and the AKP are the same. So they were, I think, then it became a target for those groups as well. Again, I think ideology is also here as well. So there are some people. I mean, if you are Muslim, that you can't be good. If you are Muslim, you can't be good. So. It's not only Gulen. I mean, if you, I'm showing data just on Gulen, but if you look at those websites or books, they're attacking the Prophet. They are saying similar things about the Prophet or the other Muslims. So he also, I think, that's one reason. But I think it's an important question, and why, and that requires probably a sociological, approach to understand the issue.
Thank you. And one last one. Did you come across any authors that wrote articles for the two separate audiences, say in Turkish and an article in English for a Western audience, or were they purely translated, or you didn't come across any author that wrote for two audiences?
Not a publication. But when I was looking at Sharon Craspin, if you look at her article, I looked at, because she's not conducting a research, she's using mainly previous publications, So I looked at her sources, what sources she used. And she used, if I remember correctly, 95% are from either newspaper or TV programs, non-academic, non-credible, sources. she had one or two academic sources, and one of was ours, and she used quite differently. Her article, if you look at her, the skeleton of her article is actually two people: Nurettin Veren in Turkey and Merdan Yanardağ. These are, you know, figures. They publish books about Gülen. In general, she is saying again, Gülen is anti-American, anti-Western, anti-Semitic. You know, he's changing Turkey. What's happening in Turkey? You know, she drove a picture of Turkey like Afghanistan. I mean, of Taliban. I mean, she, you know, there are no hospitals, no doctors, no nurses. All the places are, you know, mosques. You know, people are, you know, the budget of religious affairs is actually bigger than the 8 ministries, you know, total. I mean, but she was, forgive me about lying. I mean, I looked at her sources. I used the same sources she used, and clearly she's lying. What I was trying to say, her skeleton of her article is 2 sources: Merdan Yanardağ, Nurettin Veren. If you look at their books, the title of the book is "How Turkey is Besieged." The front page, the cover of the book, White House, Gulen, and the title is "How Turkey is Besieged." But she used this book or the newspaper program, I mean TV program, to show that Gülen is anti-American. You see what I'm saying? I mean, she is using those sources, those books or articles, to show quite the opposite of what they are saying. Another example, it's not an actual publication, but you know, there was a documentary done by a Dutch channel or a producer. They were looking at the Gulen movement in Netherlands. And Hikmet Çetinkaya is actually giving an interview to that program. You know, he has, I think, 10 books saying that Gülen is an American agent. Gülen is working for America. But in that program, he was warning Western world for an Islamist to Islamize Europe. You see what I'm... When the audience is different, they're using different language, different picture.
So the same person can write
yeah, exactly.
in Turkey and say anti-American?
Not many, but these are the examples, you know, that I have seen. But not many.
Okay, thank you.
Usually, you know, most of these articles do not know the other language. I think Sharon Crespin is the only person who can speak both Turkish and English.
Okay, thank you. We can take questions from the audience here at the front, please. If you can please state your name and affiliation, and if you can please stand for the benefit of both the speaker and the rest of the audience.
Thanks, sir. My name is Ziad Al-Haddad, former Director of Operations at the World Bank. I must compliment you on starting a piece of work.
Thank you.
And I emphasize the word starting because it's excellent, it's long due, long overdue, and I'm glad you've started.
Thank you. Thank you very
Now,
much.
why I say starting? Because I believe that there are 2 other follow-ons from this. One, of course, leading to exactly where you were mentioning. In fact, we have to answer eventually why. You have given a few indications, although you admit that you haven't done research on those indications. But there is also another chapter, or several chapters of also how. You have followed language, very interesting, extremely interesting, and you got some conclusions out of that. Another very interesting approach would be to follow money, funding.
That's right.
If you look at these same publications, you have a large set. Where do the funding of these publications come from? I think that will tell stories too. You may have some very high correlations in the graphs which come out. And I hope you continue the research because, as I said, done something great. But in the end, it's the why which is going to matter. And I think I do take your point that why is more difficult to quantify. But I think if you get correlations of 0.8 and above, the why will also come out. Why that is important is because only then will the Gulen movement be able to counter effectively what exactly is this defamation against it. And I think this type of research is exactly where many organizations have faltered because they haven't taken the first step. So this is just a comment, but I'd like your own views on what I'm saying. And I do hope you'll carry on this work.
Thank you very much. When I was, collecting data on this issue, and it's very common in America, follow the money. That's, and I'm sure you're familiar with another work, excellent work done by the Center for American Progress, the Fear Inc. Yeah. And they did exactly the same thing. I mean, they follow the money. Interestingly, some of the authors are matching, actually. There is actually a short chapter or a short piece on the Gulen movement in the report, but it's very short. The reason is because the data that they collected, they are looking at until 2009. So they ended up or defamation of Gulen started after 2009. So they don't focus on Gulen. Thank you very much. I mean, I believe that. I mean, why is very important. I mean, why is very important. But unfortunately, it's been a while. It's although the book is new, a couple of months, but I haven't done any research on the issue for 2 years. I'm studying some other issues. So I'm not sure if I can go back and look at I still keep collecting when they come out. I'm not sure if I will be looking at why, but I met some people, actually, some other researchers who wanted to study the issue, and because of the work, it came to me, and I suggested them to look at why, actually, and I'm hoping someone will come and with that work as well. But I'm not sure if I will go back. I believe it's important. It's very important, but I'm not sure if I will study.
Yes, we have another question here at the front.
My name is Thomas Michel from Georgetown University. Doan, one point that you didn't really take up specifically are the many internet critiques of the Hizmet connected schools, and particularly the charter schools. And I notice in many of these critical articles about the schools, they will mention that they are inspired by this shadowy mullah in Turkey, that sort of thing. And what I keep wondering as I read them is the focus of that. They don't like the schools because they seem to be coming from what they see as Gulen's plot against to take over America, or they don't like Gulen because they really have a animosity towards the schools. What?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned that it's because of the data. It's not included because those writings actually increased probably after 2011. At the beginning, these were the main themes that they were writing on, but later on, the focus shift to the schools, charter schools that Gulen is infiltrating into the American society. But in your, when you're doing a research, you have to end the data collections in some place. And I ended, in 2011, and I wrote actually this book or the article in 2011. So because of I didn't have them, and we didn't have those writings during those times, so I didn't include in my research. That's why. But you're right. I mean, right now the focus is on that mainly that. Because of some charter schools in America that are operated by Turkish people, by some people who are inspired by Fethullah Gülen, they are trying to establish a link between Gulen and those schools. And someone who knows the movement, as you, there's a huge. I mean, there's the idea of Gulen schools that we know throughout the world. I mean, there are private schools mainly. Not mainly. They are all private schools funded by the businessman, and also tuition from from the students. In depending on the location, depending on the country, 20 to 30% of the students are receiving scholarship. But these schools are public schools, and I think that's why they shifted. They focus on that, and they try to show these schools linked with Gulen as Gulen schools. Yeah, you're right. I mean, the focus is on that issue. The reason I didn't mention because it's not included in the data set.
Okay, any other questions? Yes, we have.
Hi, I'm Andrew Harrod.
I'll just give you the.
Hi, I'm Andrew Harrod. I'm an independent researcher and writer. I was just curious. So you speak of these two disparate attacks upon the Gulen movement. Is there any coordination between these two forms of attack, or is it just completely sort of coincidental that two completely different groups would attack the Gulen movement? Or
yeah, I think it's a good question, and I actually I thought about it. I mean, it's not in this search, but I think there is. I think there is a connection. I believe even in America, the source or the initiator of the defamation is coming from Turkey as well. I think the power circles in Turkey who are not happy with Gulen, who are not happy with the changes in Turkey, has influence in the United States, and somehow initiated these attacks, as you said. In some of the writings, I mean, these cannot be evidences, but in some of the writings, you can see that in an English writing, someone is referring to a Turkish version, but saying quite different issues. Also, we know that I don't want to it might be a conspiracy, but it's not in the book, but some newspaper published the articles saying that some generals actually made visits to United States. They came to United States, talked to some people, and somehow started some defamation. Another connection, there's a scholar writing. It's not included in my data set because he wasn't writing at that time, but he's writing a lot right now. He is in the United States, but his father-in-law is a general who is in jail in Turkey. So there's also this family connection as well. It may not be a coordination. I think it is in Turkey, within these circles, but not like someone is coordinating both. But there is connection. I think at least some. Maybe not all, but some.
Okay, I've just been given the cue. I want to thank Dr. Doğan Koç. If you can please join me in thanking him this evening.
Thank you.